This track is focused on helping folks who are in the early stages of the fair journeys. You guys in the right spot? Okay, good. Remembering that our theme of scale can mean many things depending on where you are today. You can scale from nothing to something, or from something to something more. The important part is that you take a step forward and get started today. And so the sessions in our track is going to help you do exactly that. Today we are going to hear from some incredible speakers with lots of wisdom, which when I am teaching FAIR, the one thing I do mention is, get involved with the FAIR Institute in the community, just because we do have so many people who have been doing this and have learned different aspects of it to share their wisdom on with for all of you. So our first group today is Krishna Sheshabatar.
You got it.
Thank you. All right. He is the Director of Security, Risk, and Compliance at Expedia Group. And Randy Spootsta.
You got it.
All right. Global Competency Leader for Security Strategy, Risk, and Compliance Practice at IBM Security. So they will be presenting on their work with a case study session titled Expedia Group's Approach to Build an Effective Security Risk Management Program using FAIR. So let's give them a round of applause here.
So welcome, thanks for attending, especially the last day after lunch, so kudos for sticking it out. So let me just expand a little bit on my introduction. Besides running the security risk and compliance practice at IBM, I also run the risk quantification program for the company. So I lead the team that engages with our customers and our clients. I should acknowledge, since we're at the FAIR Institute here, or FAIRCon, I am FAIR certified. I got certified in 2019, and I became an advocate and a believer right in that time. And along with my boss, who you may have heard speak earlier today, Julian Mayrick, we champion the idea of IBM endorsing FAIR and building a risk quantification capability within the organization. A little bit about my background. Before joining IBM, I was actually Chief Risk Officer for a technology company many, many years ago. But I've been in risk management, risk consulting, and risk leadership positions for about 25 years.
Thanks, Randy. So I'm Krishna Sheshabatar. I lead the security risk management function at Expedia. I also manage the third-party vendor risk. So a common link between what we do and what IBM does is that they helped us with the third-party vendor risk. And we thought it would be a great idea to invite someone who understands about our company to extend that knowledge base to cyber risk quantification as well. So that's where we extended our relationship. But more importantly, a few other things, interesting things. I strongly believe that if I am able to do cyber risk quantification, anyone else who are kind of starting new can do it. Two facts about that. One, I came to the United States about 15, 16 years ago to pursue my master's degree in food science. No kidding. I came to do my master's in food science. Then quickly realized, because I was based in Louisiana State University, and the most of the research was in catfish and other kinds of things, I don't eat meat or fish. It was hard. So quickly changed tracks. Thanks to the flexibility of the education system here, I moved and pursued my master's degree in information systems and decision sciences with a minor in internal audit, right? I took off from there, worked for PwC Public Accounting in Bay Area, so a lot of the tech clients, and learned a lot about risk and controls. So after spending maybe 6 years or so, I moved to Seattle with my wife, close to Microsoft campus, and I got my MBA in finance. So I wanted to learn about the continuum of what does risk actually mean. So I want to put myself in the shoes of the finance practitioners. So I practiced FP&A. I worked in treasury within Microsoft for close to 5 years. So now I felt confident that I have a full holistic understanding of risk. So I got a job at Expedia in their internal audit team, and then I was the IT audit manager. did a lot of IT assessments and work, things like that. But the last 3 years, I spent within the GRC team building up the security risk management program. So I will actually give it back. I'll tell more stories, but bottom line is that I could do it, I could learn, have a growth mindset and do it, so can everyone else, with the help of course, good advisors.
Well, thank you. So just before we get started, take a little quick poll. How many of you are just starting your risk quantification journey in your organization? Show of hands. Just okay, great. And how many of you are thinking about integrating risk quantification beyond cybersecurity in an integrated risk management or ERM program? Anyone that ambitious? Okay, good. So what we're going to talk about today is basically the journey that Expedia and Krishna's team is undertaking. I would characterize it as ambitious. This is not a trivial exercise. We're going from a largely qualitative world to a quantitative world at Expedia. We're moving the needle as far as the culture goes. And as Krishna will explain a little bit about the culture in the company in a minute, you'll see that this is a fairly large undertaking. And the idea here is to use risk quantification in a security mode, security manner, but use it as a foundation to expand into other competencies, functional silos within the organization. So the ambitious goal that Krishna and his team has outlined is build a foundation that we can fully integrate ERM into using risk quantification as the basis into a total risk management program. And so the idea here is that this first phase of the project is really about laying that foundation, building a knowledge and awareness around FAIR and risk quantification, how it can be leveraged, and starting to move that needle, that culture, into more of that quantitative world. So a couple things that we'll talk about today. We'll certainly cover some of the challenges along the way, the approach that we've taken, and some of the lessons learned or takeaways. But before we do that, I just did want to call out that I've been sitting in a number of sessions, as all of you have, and there's a number of nuggets that I captured. And the reason I want to share this with you is that without consciously thinking about some of the things I heard, we've actually started to use some of the things that others talked about. Omar talked about yesterday business outcomes. From the very beginning, Krishna insisted that we put this in a language of business. And how do we really talk about business impact? So we're going to mention that. James Lamb talked about you can't manage risk in silos. Exactly what Krishna and his team outlined even before we signed contracts, that this is one of the goals. We need to build an enterprise view to risk. We're going to start with security, but by design, we need to be able to expand that. And then we heard that risk management is about making better decisions. So this is a theme, and I'll come back to this a little bit later. The key component of this program was let's make better decisions. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to just instill and implement risk quantification. That's a means to an end. The end is making better decisions. And how do we do that? So that was a big theme that I noted here. And then a couple of the other things that just came up and certainly came up in our journey. So I'll just mention them now, and then we'll emphasize this throughout the session. But we need to take the ambiguity out of the language of risk. So as we started the project, working with Krishna, he very in the beginning said, I'd like to do some FAIR overview sessions with teams, people outside of security. I want them to start to become aware. And what that meant was, well, we're going to talk to compliance. We're going to talk to the BCP team. We're going to talk to threat intelligence. Guess what? They all had a different definition of risk. They all had preconceived ideas of what risk should be. And so not by conscious design, but kind of through the project, we discovered that one of the key elements here was success is going to require a common language. We needed to get people to start speaking, at least have a common definition of what risk is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that prior to this project, we had multiple interpretations of what risk is in the different silos, different functional areas. And so then the last thing I just want to call out is John's presentation at Gartner. Some of you sat in that session earlier today. He talked about a couple themes that I think were the perfect segue for what we're talking about, which is really, risks are increasing, security budgets are flat or decreasing. So what does that mean? That means CISOs and security practitioners have to be smart. They have to make smarter decisions. They have to prioritize their projects and their requests for spending, and you need data to do that. You need to come in there with ammunition, with a defensible business case if you're going to pitch for more money or even maintaining your security budget. John also talked about the need to align risk across the organization in an ERM model. That's our goal. That's exactly what we're trying to do here at Expedia. And he talked a little bit about, and we'll talk a little bit more about it here, the importance of risk governance and risk culture. So a company as complex as Expedia has multiple risk cultures. It has multiple risk governance structures, inherited and built over time. And moving that towards a centralized view is a key objective of the project and the journey we're on. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can start us on the journey.
Perfect. I will not hold this. It's
Okay.
too heavy. So before we get into the whole how we did this, I want to briefly give you an overview of my company, Expedia. Expedia Group, Expedia.com. So one or many of you would have been using one of our websites to travel. But our own mission, our big mission is to be that we believe that travel is a force for good. We want to make travel available for anyone and everyone, anywhere. That's the platform we are trying to build. Like so many people, companies, countries, we have been impacted by COVID quite a bit. Practically it went to zero, travel, no travel, right? 2.5 years back. But we use that opportunity to actually build our platform, build our company, rethink about our strategy, what we are here for, and what are we trying to do. We put everything that we thought and had traveler at the center of all the decisions that we made, right? So previously, to give you a flavor of how big it is. So we have more than 20 different brands: Expedia.com, Hotel.com, Hotwire.com, Orbitz.com, Verbo, vacation rental thing, CarRental.com, etc., 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 cruise lines, activities, etc. So there are a multitude of different brands. The complexity was that 2.5, 3 years back, the previous CEO and CFOs, the strategy was to keep individual brands independent so that they can choose their own tech stacks. What Hotels.com did was their business. As long as we can, show the financial results at the end of the quarter, doesn't matter. One brand was supposed to compete with the other brand. So that's where the culture came. We had multiple systems, multiple duplicative systems doing the exact same thing, trying to sometimes achieve conflicting priorities, right? We want to synergize and take synergies from the different brands. So we put together the new CEO that we have right now. The new strategy is to put the traveler at the center of all the decisions, all the strategies. We wanted to build a platform so that it connects the demand side and supply side of travel. Let's say someone is a TikTok influencer of travel. We want to enable them with few clicks, create their own website so that we can connect the demand side, which is the customer, and the supply side, the hotels or the destination together within few clicks. That's the power of the platform that we want to bring to the table. But as I said, different brands, different technologies, huge risks just laying out there unattended. So before I go into the risk program goals and objectives, I want to just present what are the challenges we faced for building the risk management program. So 3 years ago, there was no program. Thankfully, I joined the team, of course. And then we at least had put together a risk register. It had complaints, it had warnings, it had all sorts of things, you name it. So we had to clean it up. Almost from 3,500 different entries, we narrowed it down to about 250 items. We are still cleaning up, right? And also, with COVID came few different complexities. One, the connectivity issue. One of the challenge was that our call center agents, they're based in Egypt or somewhere in Eastern Europe or in South America. They all went home to work. There are PCI issues. We are a global, e-commerce travel company. A lot of people, there is no hard cash being used. It's all credit card. So our exposure became enormous, exponential. We didn't know a way to actually quantify and put together what does it actually mean to the board. Yeah, we had technology issues, but more importantly, this was a business issue. How do we present? The thing that I put together couldn't stand that. Yes, we streamlined things. We put together a program, nice, shiny Confluence pages, etc. We had a heat map. I can name everything from the last 2 days, all the things that other speakers told not to do. We did that. We had an ordinal scale 1 through 5. We had a heat map. I used some creative math. So I combined 1 to 5 scale and the severity ratings together. The math added up perfectly to tell the story, oh, the top right corner is where you need to focus, and this is where we need to fix things. That worked to a certain extent, but not well. Again, patching. We had end-of-life systems, which were not tracked. At any given point of time, the leadership team could not get a full view, tell me everything that's going on, because we had individual stacks of technologies, right? The third one is newer technology adoption. A lot of things, because independence was given, everyone was driving their own ships, if you will. So we couldn't present the holistic view. So all in all, the whole thing was distributed, not scalable, misaligned, disaggregated. We were way too short-term focused. Oh, certain thing came up. We had 1 million different short-term policy exceptions. We had to control that, right? And the core of the thing is there a consistent way to actually reform this whole policy exceptions issue? And lastly, the thought process has changed. We need to move away from playing whack-a-mole all the time. We wanted to create a centralized risk register, bring people with the similar thoughts around controls and compliance and risks to the same table, be it the controllership team, the audit team, my GRC team. We are directionally going in the right direction, but we were all over the place. We didn't have a framework that could tie or unify our thought process. We wanted to shift from a tactical to strategic way of thinking about risk. And finally, we want to get certified because the new way of actually knowing about my team is not, I'm not a security risk program manager or a lead. I want to be known as the decision enabler of decision making. In that process, we want to help, again, going back to defining in terms of business outcomes, we want to establish trust for the customer. In that, the certification, SOC 2 certifications, because we do B2B business with other corporations like the financial institutions or the banks, Amex, etc., where customers can come from their side, exchange their points towards travel, wherein we power the travel, they ask for SOC 2 certification. We didn't have a framework to do that. And finally, this is a big, ambitious goal we want to get to, as Randy was explaining. We want to get to the ERM. All other constituents in the controls and risk space were slow to move. We got a lot of traction from the security risk management program that we run. We want to leverage that platform and pedestal to actually get us closer. So now I'll actually go back to the risk program goals. Having all that in mind, we want to make the risk quantification the core of how we think about risk. That's the normalizing factor. Doesn't matter whether it's a cyber risk, operational risk, financial risk. That's the beauty of FAIR, in my opinion. We have seen few different use cases. We want to, expand the envelope, push the envelope, thinking in different kinds of use cases where FAIR can be put into use. We have some foundational elements that IBN team actually helped us not only think about horizontally integrating, but not vertically integrating within the security team, because it's easy. I'm in security team, GRC is in security team, I can have my threat intel team or the CSIRT team. It's easy to work with them. It's hard to stretch my hand to the controllership team, which thinks about the operational risk, extend it to legal team, which thinks about reputational risk, yeah? So that's the goal. I won't bore you with all the details, but that's the overarching thing, quantitative approach. If we abstract that, normalize all the risks in terms of annual loss expectancy, there's a beautiful thing that comes out of it. ERM is what we want to get to. These are the objectives. This is one level down, like I want to move from the reactive to proactive. This is actually tying back to all the things that I said in the challenges in the right-hand side. Moving from tactical to strategic, as well as focus on our key assets. Like every other company in the Pacific Northwest, Expedia is the largest customer for AWS. Even though we are the largest user, our assets are still spread across data center and cloud. How do I show a consistent picture, full picture of these are my core assets, and how do I actually present the risk to the leadership team? That is where IBM came, and then, ta-da, did the magic.
So a couple things here we talk about as we talk about the solution. The objectives that Krishna just shared with you, those are risk management objectives. They're not cybersecurity objectives, they're risk management. And we use those objectives to open up conversations with other teams, the BCP team, the compliance team, threat intelligence. So the idea was, do you agree with these objectives? Do you think this is the right direction Expedia should be going to? We get their early buy-in on the goal before we even started talking about FAIR or risk quantification. And that was important because, as you can see in this journey, and many of you probably have similar experiences, in a complex organization like Expedia, grown up with very segmented, distributed tech stacks, they had their own way of doing things. No one wanted to be told that there was a new way to do it. So we started with the idea of communicating objectives and goals, and then we'll get into methods and technology. And so, one of the key, I think, selling points of the program was to get more of a cohesive understanding of where we're going on this journey. So talk about the solution a little bit. The first thing is we wanted to put a business lens on the discussion. It's hard to argue that a risk isn't real if you can start to talk about the impact to the business. And if you could put it in terms that non-technical people, non-security people can understand, you're making progress. You're getting their awareness, their mind share. And that was a key element. So Krishna insisted from the very beginning that we don't talk so much about specific technology solutions to risk scenarios or risk aspects, but we talk about the business impact. And you could see in the very bottom corner on the right, this really is about brand and reputation. That's what Expedia Group is all about. 26 brands, I think you said?
Yep.
And so it's about protecting those brands and the reputation. As you said, everything is credit card, PCI. People trust that when they connect to an Expedia call center for any of the brands, that the information they're going to provide is going to be safe. And that's just a given. That's a reputational aspect that was very important. And if we start talking about risk in terms of reputation and brand, guess what? We got everyone's attention. Leadership was involved at this point. So the other component here is language. And I talked a little bit about this, but we needed to find a common bridge across organizations that had preconceived ideas. Not everyone bought into FAIR. Not everyone bought in that risk quantification was the way to go. And so we didn't throw out the old way. There's room, and we talked about this with various stakeholders, that risk management is a continuum of risk methodologies and approaches. There's room for qualitative analysis, but there's also a need for quantitative analysis. The trick is to know when to conduct quantitative analysis. That's a little heavier lift in many cases, but subject matter expertise is valued as well. So one of the things we did as part of the solution, I'll talk about this in a second, but a key component was develop something we called an intake process, which is understanding when someone raises a concern, a risk, an issue. Let's understand the attributes of it. Let's understand whether that's truly a risk or is it something else. If it's a concern, maybe it doesn't have all the attributes of what a risk is. And using FAIR, we challenge that. We said a risk really needs to have a threat. Is there a threat actor involved in this? What's the asset at play? What's the asset that could be breached or damaged? And what's the impact? So if it didn't meet that criteria, it could be something else. It could be a control gap. It could be findings from audit. Those are concerns. Those are something that goes into the risk register, but they're not risk scenarios, and they may not require risk quantification to identify what the best approach is to address or mitigate them. So the intake process was important for Expedia and for the organization to start to filter how do we move to risk quantification? When do we use it? When does it require that kind of analysis? So it's kind of a decision tree. You can start with qualitative and say, wow, this is kind of interesting. The more we learned about this concern, this issue, it really looks like a risk now. Well, let's move down that a little further and understand what that really impacted the business, and then we can start to decide whether we want to do the quantification. So the solution is really having a flexible approach. It's not throw out the old or just jump to the new. It's all of it exists. Knowing when and where to use it is the key. And that was a big part of what the program was. So yeah, benefits. Talk about this for a minute. Probably one of the biggest things that we had to address and needed to address was the culture change. And we recognized this from very, very beginning. Krishna had coached our team, and when I say our team, this was really a collaborative team between IBM and Expedia all the way through. So we were in meetings together virtually. We were talking the same language to all the different stakeholders. But the key thing was understanding that the legacy Expedia group, with all these different brands and individual approaches, really did require a culture change. So this project is less about technology and less about methodology and more about change management. It's really about moving the needle on culture. And what does that require? A lot of communications. We held a series of fair overview sessions, and we continue to broaden them. And Expedia continues to hold those sessions today with new stakeholders. So it's not a one and done. You can't just do an overview and hope people get it. You have to come back and again. We had people who challenged us, and we heard this morning challenging could be a good thing. Well, people had preconceived ideas of what risk is and risk management is, and certainly preconceived ideas on how to do risk assessments, heat maps and nominal scales, right? Yep. Those have been used for years, and people grew up with that in risk management. So they're comfortable with that. They're comfortable providing dashboards and reports to executives that show that. So culture change management is starting to socialize people. You're going to see a different kind of risk report coming out. It's got numbers on it. What do those numbers mean? How to interpret that? And so that's all part of that cultural change. And that's not something that I would suggest you underestimate. Going through a couple of the other things, I talk about the normalization. You mentioned the risk register. When we first look at the risk register, it had well over 100, couple hundred, right? Risk registered in there. But they weren't all risk. Many of them were findings, compliance gaps, issues that people would just generate and put in there. And so there was no prioritization. Where do we focus? How do we address this? And the backlog was daunting, well over 100, 200 at one point. And so what we started to do was normalize what was in the risk register. And this comes back to that intake process, understanding when and where to use risk quantification. So the normalization of the risk register was actually about bucketing these things into categories. Is that a compliance gap, a compliance finding? Okay, that goes in a bucket. Was that a control gap? Okay, let's put that over there. Is that a risk? Is there a threat? Is there an asset at play? What's the effect to the business? And so now we were able to narrow that down and take that risk register down into category, I think last time this was 26 or something?
Yeah, 26.
26 identified risk. Now that's manageable. Now we can start to prioritize projects. We can run the risk analysis and figure out what the top risks were. So that was a key component of this project is kind of finding the noise in the system today and then pulling that out to get to the really top risk. And to make the program credible, it's something we had to do. We had to show people that already the progress was made, that not all these things are risk. Not everything needs to surface up to the leadership in heat maps and dashboards and et cetera.
Excellent.
A couple of the other benefits, a key thing was scalability. So the goal here isn't for cybersecurity to own risk quantification forever. It's to scale it into the organization, into the other practices, other functional areas, so they can take it on. Now, again, we're in the beginning of this journey, so it's going to take a while. We'll build a proficiency with Krishna and his team in security, and then from there it starts to expand. But the key benefit there is knowing from the get-go, and by design, we are going to expand this program. We're going to bring in folks from threat intelligence and from BCP and compliance. So that was key in the understanding. And then unlock the value of security. And a number of folks talked about this over the last couple of days. Krishna has been great to work with. He basically said, I do not want to be a task-oriented security organization, just looking at projects and stuff. I need, which is the word you use, an enabler of decision-making. Yeah. I want to be able to provide the data to key leadership so they can make smart decisions when we have scarce budgets. And Expedia, through COVID, is one of the companies that was hard hit. As everyone knows, no one traveled for a couple of years. So budgets and money wasn't flowing in and across the organization. So that was even more important to Christian and his team about how do we make better decisions, smarter decisions. Let's use the data we have. So those were some of the benefits, and starting to be realized as this journey goes through the first phase.
Yes. So there are two things that I will take and carry it forward. One thing is building the credibility. Why should people believe in risk lens or FAIR or risk quantification? And the second one is enabler of decision making. My key OKR for the risk program for 2023 and going beyond is that we want to unlock the value of security by being helping the CISO, not just the CISO, but the business organization in making decisions. And that was a driving force in selecting use cases that will prove the credibility of the platform that we have chosen, right?
Hey, Krishna, can you speak into the mic for the virtual?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So our target audience, when we were selecting the different use cases or scoping the use cases, was a few different people, meaning I want to speak to the technology leaders, I want to speak to the business leaders as well. So, as I said earlier, we made all the mistakes on our journey to actually doing this. One mistake when selecting the use cases was, oh, I did SOX work. Why don't I select financial systems, SOX, the reporting system or the FP&A systems, Hyperion forecasting systems, into building a use case? We were almost 1/3 into our journey, then realized, damn, if I don't do forecast, there's no big deal. We have prior forecast and then increase it by 10%, 20%, we'll get to the same point. Even if the systems are down, we can live with it. I need better examples to actually prove the use cases and the scenario that FAIR will help. So there are two things. The first one is that, like it or not, most of the companies have to live with compliance. So we want to take that example because it's a pain and it helps as well, not only to the security org, but also to the business. We took one example of a compliance requirement and then did a cost-benefit analysis. Why do we need to comply with a certain requirement, right? My point was that I want to prove the opportunity cost. If we don't do this, how much are we going to lose? What are all the other things that we can actually do? Like it or not, again, compliance programs are bad. They get a bad rap, but they help in instilling at least a minimum level of what you call hygiene into the company. Even though we check, we do certain things. So we wanted to take the goodness, show this to the business leaders. This is what it means by not complying. You can hit, especially in travel industry with a lot of PCI presence, not being compliant means all these things. You can read through the numbers, but the idea is that we want to present a use case that proves that FAIR can be applied, pushing the envelopes, the limits of how and where FAIR can be applied, right? This is one use case. And the second use case, this is going to the core of our whole company's mission. Traveler is the center of everything. So we want to build a use case going through the traveler journey. What does it mean if something happens in the traveler experience? So we overlaid the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we came up with a case wherein we showed that if the website that a customer uses goes down, because we keep on pushing changes, like the developers keep on pushing the change request continuously. Lots of code changes happen. If the website were to break due to misconfiguration, what does it actually mean? This speaks to my audience of the CTO. This speaks to the reliability management VPs and above. This speaks to the CISO, because he is interested with the trust aspect of our customer journey. We break the customer's trust. So we took this and then tried to, think about all the cyber risks due to the misconfiguration. A lot of numbers, but the idea is that we went through and used this use case to prove the point that we can present a cyber issue in terms of business use case. This speaks to the technology leadership. This speaks to the business leadership team. This is the common driving force which will converge both those leaders. This will empower my CISO to actually sit and have a conversation with the CFO to ask for more money. Or this will help my CISO's peer, who is a reliability engineering team, to tell this is how it is, right? After doing all these use cases, 2 or 3, we did few more as well. But I think it's the key things. Yes, we are able to, this gives us a platform, this meaning FAIR methodology and also risk quantification gives us a platform to have a conversation, extend beyond our AL to reach out to other parts of the company which live in risk and control space. But more importantly, I think about in terms of A, B, and C. A being increasing the awareness. Now, my report can reach to the far corners of the company. It doesn't matter whether we have 1 brand, 2 brands, or 26 brands. This is the common terminology. Consistently reporting, normalizing the risk in terms of dollar values. Second one is the B, behaviors. I can have a say. I can confidently say that I can influence the way people react and behave, be it through the phishing campaigns that we run. We can use FAIR to actually model the situation to say the amount, the money we are spending on these campaigns, what kind of changes are we actually seeing? We talk about a lot of risk reduction. This actually, again, pushing the envelope to think about different use cases. We can do that with FAIR. And finally, the culture, the C, ABCs. The cultural aspect is extremely important. We want to build a culture wherein everyone pitches into the idea of making the company secure and making the traveler journey more secure and trustworthy. That's the idea. That's the goal we want to push further. As I said, we just started the journey. Almost 1 year back, we engaged with IBM. They have done a lot of groundwork, built the foundational capabilities to put into place. So we worked on creating what he calls risk quantification POCs. So that's done. We developed a target operating model, how different constituents of the company can provide inputs. We normalize that and then share in terms of what the risks are. And then there are so many others. Right now, for this quarter, end of December, we are putting together a risk committee, risk governance committee, thinking about risk appetite, risk thresholds, and things like that, top risk exercise. So we are slowly marching. While we are doing that, we are continuing to have conversations with my controllership team and the internal audit team. The language is extremely important. We want them to embrace this FAIR framework. All the work that we did so far actually builds a tailwind to us. It creates momentum. On top of that, I have very good buy-in from thankfully, my security leadership team as well. So we are there. Probably we'll come back a year later and share our success stories. But I'm very optimistic of the things that we have done so far.
Okay, so just a couple key takeaways and learnings from this project, and I just share it with you. And Christian and I have talked about this a few times. The first thing was, this is a change management project. We need to address it as such. It is not a technology project. And we wanted to make sure that we put in place the idea that communication, and more communication is going to be key. Putting together an idea of what the objectives are that everyone can march to. So, you know, one of my former bosses used to say, at some point, the organization, the boat is leaving the slip. The organization either is going to stay on the dock or get on the boat, but there's no middle ground. And this is what we're really trying to do, is build this foundation now so that the whole organization gets on the ship. And that's a change management kind of philosophy. The second thing was we needed to take the time to convince people that FAIR was more than a theory, that it could be actualized and operationalized. So some of the early questions were, yeah, I've seen FAIR, or yeah, I looked at the model. It's kind of theoretical. So we had to demonstrate that it could be actualized and show these people and these teams that there was a practical value and a practical approach on how to do that. The third thing is to identify and build champions. So we've got champions in Krishna's team. They're all in. What we need and want are champions in other organizations, and they become the advocates. And it becomes kind of a groundswell, the momentum you mentioned. So it's important early on to find those folks in those other organizations, those functional areas, that will become your champions, and get them involved early, get them become aware, trained, and then become advocates. We mentioned horizontal and vertical, and I'll just comment on this. In a project this ambitious, there's a lot of different pressure points. Pressure points are building momentum and then cascading this out into the other kind of functional areas. That's one way of expansion. But we also had leadership involvement. And so once leadership gets involved, what's the first thing they say? Faster. We need this faster, or move quicker on this area. So the balancing act is you got to bring the organization along with you, with all your stakeholders. So we had horizontal and vertical stakeholders. And that is a balancing act. It takes some conscious thinking about setting and managing expectations, both from the functional teams as well as leadership. And then I want to say that, you know, the goal here is to move into an ERM mentality and approach and philosophy. The target operating model isn't a cybersecurity model. It's a risk management model. And that way, it can be applied to all the organizations. If it had that cybersecurity view to it, it's simply an incident response model or process, then we would have lost the interest of other organizations. So the target operating model really became the basis for this discussion, that this is about risk management. And I guess the last point here I want to make is that this really wasn't a journey on risk quantification. It was a journey about how to revamp and improve risk management. And that's the way we positioned this. So risk quantification is the catalyst, it's the foundation, but it's a means to an end, which is a much better risk management program.
Excellent. I'll tell one last, what you call, fun fact. This is interesting. I work for Expedia. We are in the business of travel. I'm extremely paranoid about flying. I hate and dread it. The last flight which I took from Seattle to Baltimore, 4.5 hours, I almost read 2 books, 2 full books. So I'm dealing with it, trying to learn what I can do. I took some irrational steps as well, like I jumped out of a plane skydiving, 13,000 feet. But then I try to use a few other methods, but it's all fun. I'm getting better. I'll leave it at that, but thank you very much.
Oops. Yeah, so thank you guys for giving them a round of applause. I know there were a couple questions, but they had so much wisdom to share, so we will keep moving along. A very insightful session.
But please do find us on LinkedIn if you have any further questions. Happy to answer any of those, please. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.